Now, here's the thing. Most of us are very, very lucky because we're just stupid organisms walking around aimlessly. And we find stupid, idiotic, childish things interesting. And we live in a buffet of opportunities, desires. From coffee to tea to water to Coke to Kool-Aid, it matters very little. You long for things, you have the resources to satisfy them, and you do. And then you have the privilege to trash them once they bore you, and then you just move on to the next thing. You know, there's a part in the movie The Matrix where Agent Smith has cuffed Morpheus. And he's looking out the window and he says, look out there. All these people walking around like a virus. They move into an environment. They take all the resources. And that environment just slowly dies. And then the human being just moves on to the next new thing. The tragedy is not that you long. The tragedy happens when you long for something you can't get, and the longing never leaves you. You know, the tragedy for Plato was that when he was young, and because his mother was a religious woman, because his father was a politician and a lawyer, they had connections to create inside him the longing of becoming a politician, the longing of becoming a lawyer, and perhaps the longing of becoming a father. But Socrates created inside him a longing that he couldn't really touch. And the thing he was connected to, he couldn't bring it down and contaminate it. He always had to ascend. He always had to fly. And whenever you fly, you have to leave behind the human parts. You know, we are very lucky that the people in our lives are superficial and shallow, and the things we desire are superficial and shallow. That you don't get depressed because your longing has deep roots where it just leaves you in a complete state of poverty for the rest of your life. You're always moving on. You go into things, occupy them, suck the marrow out of them, and then move on. So let me tell you what happens to Rumi. He's born in a religious environment, but we're talking about religion in a very ritualistic way. You go to church every Sunday, you read the Bible every night. There is no longing. It's just something you do. It's like eating or going to the bathroom. And then this man is about, 50 or so, maybe 40. He runs into Rumi when Rumi is only 21. Rumi looks interesting, but he's a kid. He knows a lot of things. He's like instructors on campus. Oh yeah, I've read the dialogues of Plato. I've read Foucault, Heidegger, oh yeah. Kierkegaard, Sartre, I've read them all. That's Rumi, He's read a lot of books. And he's worshipped by his town. And you know what happens when you are the object of someone's worship or a community's of worship? Man, your arrogance, your hubris It's from here to the moon. It's huge. And then despite the fact that Shams loves Rumi, he says, he's not ready. I want to create inside him a longing, a yearning, a brokenness that will be inside him for the rest of his life. I refuse to be exploited, Shams says. I don't want you to have sex with me and then forget me. I cost too much. I'm far too valuable to be contaminated like that. He waits. He waits and waits and waits until Rumi is about 38 years old. That is a great teacher, man, who knows that you have a talent, but also knows you're going to waste it. You're going to waste your own talent. You're also going to waste the teachings of Socrates because you don't have ears that know how to listen well. You don't have eyes that see well. So your longing will stay for a year and then disappear. How could any instructor in the social sciences at the age of 15 be moved by an event they see in the streets, injustice, poverty, and then just after 20 years walk to a classroom and talk about poverty in a very callous way and then say, I'll give you a quiz? How could you quiz someone on the Four Noble Truths? And then justify it by saying, well, information is important for students to have. And they'd be so cunning and self-deceiving by making SLOs and PLOs and ILOs and who the hell knows what else is out there. So important. And Shams knows all of this. What's the use of yearning if it's going to be forgotten? Why waste energy on it? Some weeks ago, she asked, how can I learn about relationships? You long for the wrong people. You look for the wrong people. They'll eventually bore you. And then you'll walk away. So Shams waits and waits and waits, and Rumi's about 38. He comes to realize that he's read enough books, Rumi has. He has been worshipped for about 20 years. But there are these moments inside Rumi, where he just wakes up. And he says to himself, whispers, and he's married, he's got kids. Is this it? When you ask if this is it, it means the house that you bought is no longer enough. At some point, it made you a home, but that home is no longer a home. It's just a house. The Tesla is no longer sufficient. Your companion is no longer sufficient. The kids, no longer sufficient. Money, no longer sufficient. Physical power, no longer sufficient. You need something more. You need students. If you want them to be broken in the right way, you need students who follow the steps given to us by Abraham Maslow. Make sure they are physically healthy, that their organs work well, that they have food in their belly, they have parents who love them, they have a place they can rest their heads on. That they have friends that they have a job, that they have money. Because when you have a home, it becomes indifferent after a while. When you have parents, they become indifferent after a while. When you have degrees, they become indifferent after a while. When you're married, it becomes irrelevant after a while. When you have kids, they don't take too much space inside you after a while because they go and live their own lives. When you have power, physical power, it becomes irrelevant after a while. Now you're hungry. You're hungry for something you don't see, you don't know, and yet something inside you is restless. And that particular restlessness can't be pacified, can't be numbed by sex, by drugs, by money, by walking to class and talking. You're broken, you're ready. Now Shams enters. But you see, good teachers, they don't just possess information. They don't just possess knowledge. There is something about them that is mysterious. They have been touched by something. They may not even know what it is themselves, but you feel it. You know it. You can intuit it. And every time you want to touch what lives inside your teacher, Shams or Jesus Christ, you reach for it. You see, like the way you reach for Beatrice? But you say, I touch him or her, but I'm not really quite sure if I can get what I'm looking for, if I can see what I'm looking for. It's always beyond my reach, and I don't know why. And so he looks at Rumi one day as Rumi is giving a sermon in front of 400 of the students. And he looks at him and says, Rumi, you're Rumi? He says, yeah. I am Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi Balkhi. And this Shams al-Tabriz looks at him and says, you suck as a human being, you suck as a teacher, you suck as a Muslim. But it's really, really strange, Chris, because Rumi knows all of that. But you see, the closest people to you will always lie to you. They will always worship you, but in all the wrong ways. You need someone from the outside who really loves these parts in you that can't be touched by anything physical. And the moment the class is over, he runs after this man. And he has this line in the Masnavi that I look at you and I fall in love with your beard. And Rumi says, I want someone to look at me and fall in love with my soul. But in order for you to fall in love with someone's soul, you need to have a soul yourself. And you need to have access to your soul. Because if you don't have a soul, all you have is imagination, assumption. And that's going to backfire eventually. You assume that you know what love is, so you get into relationships. And 2 months later, you realize, oh, well, this is not really working out. And all you have are just haunting memories that create nothing but obstacles. And should you continue that path, what you just need is therapy for the next 50 years. That's not love, that's just poison. Rumi, this young man with a good amount of privilege, takes this old man, about 20 years older than he is. He takes him into his house. He goes into the study, locks the door, and tells his wife, leave our food outside, don't come in. Leave our tea outside, don't knock on the door. I don't want to be disturbed. For weeks, it's just this old man and this young kid. And no one knows what actually took place behind closed doors. No one knows what sort of intimacy they had. Rumi never expressed what took place behind closed doors. What takes place between you and your teacher must always remain behind closed doors. You must never express them to elevate your own status. Never. Never use them as a form of gossip. But you know, he has had a community of 400 people who worship him on a daily basis. Who is this old man who has taken our teacher away from us? Now you have jealousy. Now you have anger. And you know, Rumi does something really interesting. To keep his teacher there, he says, I will give you my daughter. How old is his daughter? 12. How old is Shams? 60. How could Rumi love this old man more than his own daughter? How could Abraham sacrifice Isaac or Ishmael to please God? When you love something or someone for the right reasons, when they are unreachable, when they are a mystery, you will sacrifice whatever. You don't even care. But you better make sure that your love is not love of colors. عشق‌هایی که از پی رنگی بود، عشق نبود. عاقبت ننگی بود. That if you love someone because they look good, give it some time. Soon they'll have wrinkles. If you love someone because they smell good, give it some time. Soon they will sweat and they'll smell bad. If you love someone because they speak well, just wait. After a while you realize they have nothing more to say. Colors. Passage of time removes all things that are attractive, except that which is a mystery. You know, in the third, I think, commandment, if I'm not mistaken, don't have the word God in your mouth. Don't speak it. It's far too sacred. Allow it to be a mystery. Don't give it any images, because then you'll worship the image as opposed to the thing itself. But there comes a point where Shams says, you know, this place is no good for me. He leaves. He doesn't tell Rumi anything. No texts, no phone calls. One morning, Rumi just wakes up and leaves. You know, if I was your father, Chris, and if you and I have had a great relationship, and all of a sudden I come to you and say, Chris, I'm sorry, you know, I got cancer. And then you say, and you get, of course, sad and all that stuff. And then I get really sick. And you're every day by my bedside and take care of me. You love me, no doubt, but taking care of anyone who's sick for a long period, it creates a good amount of frustration, anger, because you have to put your own life on pause. There are times where you no longer have the emotional capacity, the physical capacity to take care of me. You just want your own space for a day, maybe two, maybe three. You just want to walk away. It's too much. And then I die. But before I die, once in a while you do something really interesting as my son. You say, God, no, he's never going to get better. Just kill him. Give me my life back and give him his dignity. I slowly ready you for my death. It won't come to you as a shock. You will cry when I die, ultimately. But imagine the other scenario. You love me, we have a great time. You wake up at 5 in the morning, you've made coffee, you knock on my door. Dad, coffee is ready. The door doesn't open. Dad, coffee is ready. The door doesn't open. You open the door, you walk in, and you realize, I look gray. And you touch my skin, and it's cold. I'm dead. Now there's a shock. This particular grief is far more devastating. I died before giving you any notice. I just died, man. Shams just leaves. What do you think is going to happen to your longing? If from 1 to 100, when you're with Shams and he creates all this longing inside you, you're at 60. When he leaves without any notice, you're like 99.999, you're about to explode. What did I do? Where is he? He is my only vehicle to the mystery. Through him. Remember the Gospel of John? Where he says, I am the light, I am the bread. Before Abraham, I. If you want to get to the Father, you have to go through me. Who the hell is able to reach God, man? I can't go to the moon. But let me talk to someone who's been there. And through his stories, I can imagine what the moon is like. When you come to me and say, what happens when you get a full-time job? Well, I'm not going to tell you, well, go out there, apply, go through another 20 years of being rejected, and finally you'll get a full-time job and then you'll know. I won't do that to you. You will know what it means to get a full-time position through me. I will tell it to you. You don't have to wait. I'll give you the experiences. And do you know why you come to me? Because you can't get there on your own. Shams is the only person who can contain Rumi's longing that's caused by separation, by mystery. And then he leaves, and you're about to explode. So he sends out all these people, go out there, look for him. They find him, they bring him back. And they lock themselves in a room for another few weeks, and then he leaves. There are stories. His son killed him. Rumi's son killed Shams, or maybe he just disappeared. And then something very interesting happens. Rumi becomes like Plato. Rumi becomes like St. Paul. Rumi becomes like Augustine. Rumi becomes like St. Francis of Assisi. He writes 700 poems, all dedicated to his teacher. And by poems, I don't mean a line here, a line there. I mean poems that are 20, 30 lines, and you need to know Persian poetry. If you're uneducated, if you don't know symbolism, if you don't know metaphors, if you don't know religion well, if you don't know your culture well, if you don't speak the people's language, you can't write poetry. You need to know the Quran inside and out. You need to be an introvert so you can create stories. And these poems are so difficult to understand that even native people, I speak Persian, I read Persian, I sing Persian. Out of the 800 poems dedicated to his teacher, I only understand maybe 5. I mean, talk about a man in whom yearning caused by separation from his teacher is so intense that he sits and prays, worships his church, synagogue, temple, pen and paper. And then something magical happens. He says, I don't care about Shams anymore, man. Shams lives inside me now. For I and the Father are one and the same. And he writes his masterpiece, the Masnavi, 6 books. Doesn't refer to Shams anymore. I am Shams, he says. My book is the Persian Quran. You don't need to know Arabic. You don't need to read the Quran. Read the Masnavi. His longing and yearning lasted for about 20 years or so. The last 5 to 7 years of his life, he couldn't write. He just didn't write. Not a single word. He was a corpse, while alive. You know, the thing with esoteric philosophy, mystical philosophy, the right religious philosophy, is that they get you in touch with something that you can touch, either with your physical body or with your imagination. There'll be some experiences once every 10 years. And the problem with this particular union is that it stays with you for 10 seconds. It'll feel as if you've been in it for like 5 years. It's only 10 seconds. And then it goes away. And then your longing is multiplied 1,000-fold. You feel the separation, the angst, the dread. You know, if you've seen the movie Moana, the grandmother leads her into this cave. And there are all these boats. And she has this mystical experience, you see. She doesn't know how it happens. All of a sudden, the boats come to life. She sees people on these boats. And these boats are on the ocean. It lasts for no more than a few seconds. And all of a sudden, she's moved, she's inspired. She runs into the tent, telling her father and all the people sitting, we were once voyagers, have no fear. And there is this longing inside her that can no longer be contained. And even when her grandmother is dying, she says to her, you have seen, you know, go. She leaves her people behind, her parents behind, and her sick, dying grandmother behind. She gets on this boat and leaves. She knows that the world is a den of thieves. What benefit is there for a man who gains the whole world but loses her soul? Moana has experienced her own soul and she wants more of it. And the only way she can have more is by going on this journey. Everyone in this class longs, Chris. Everybody does. You just need to have a very unique human being to come into your life to create a longing that will last a lifetime. You have to bleed, man. Your heart is always going to be broken, and you need to know how to live with it. That's Plato. That's Socrates. That's Nietzsche. If you long for the right things, you will never attain union. You'll always be in separation. Your body, very organically, puts you in exile. Well, it's been another useless day. Abigail.